Global pandemics have always shown the power to reshape the world as well as its trade system and economics. Two of the most recent pandemics that devastated millions were both COVID-19 and the Spanish flu of 1918. Though they happened 100 years apart from each other and in very different eras, both left big impacts on the global economy and trade. Both of them caused massive declines in international trade, having massive impacts on supply chains and making governments rethink how they want the economy to run. To start, I'm going to look at specifics of how both COVID-19 and the Spanish flu impacted global trade. Then I will look at examples of countries during these pandemics to see how they handled the decrease both in their economics and global trade. Finally, I will look at how both of these pandemics affected certain products that were popular at the time to see how COVID and the Spanish flu altered consumers' behavior. The Spanish flu, which began in 1918, was deadly. It was estimated that it caused around 25 to 50 million deaths, maybe even up to 100 million. Symptoms included a high fever, a headache, body aches, and potential female or other complications. This happened at a time when the world was recovering from World War I. There were a lot of bad blood between countries in the trade networks because of the wartime disputes, and the flu further weakened these trade systems. According to a study published by Oxford Academy, they said the Spanish flu significantly impacted labor and resource availability, leading to disruptions in production and transportation. This in turn made it difficult for countries to maintain trade flow. It just shows the impact Spanish flu really had on the countries as a whole, impacting trade and also labor to produce goods. Transportation systems like railroad and boats were stranded due to the flu being highly deadly among workers, making it difficult to transport goods. Not being able to ship products not only made everything expensive, but a country whose economics depended on international trade really suffered. So exports and imports dropped in a lot of countries during the peak of the Spanish flu. The global economy entered a recession because of the Spanish flu. In contrast, the COVID-19 pandemic hit a highly connected and global economic environment. COVID wasn't as deadly as the Spanish flu, but it still caused 2 million deaths and caused countries to shut down to protect their citizens. Some symptoms of it included fever or chills, cough, shortness of breath or difficult breathing, sore throat. It caused the world to shut down for months. With massive layoffs and people staying at home, the shockwaves hit immediately. While ports across most countries stayed open, the limit of workers they had, not a lot of goods got shipped out. With just-in-time supply chains reliance on international labor and goods, many countries felt the shockwaves of COVID-19 almost immediately. Border closures, shipping delays, and factory shutdowns led to a collapse in trade volume in the early 2020. According to the World Trade Organization, they said global merchandise trade fell by over 5% in 2020, with certain industries such as tourism, aviation, and automotive manufacturing facing even steeper declines. Unlike during the Spanish flu, technology allowed for some places, particularly services, to continue to work during COVID-19, making the economic damage overall be low, but the effects were still felt. Different countries experience different types of economic problems depending on their already existing economic structure and how fast they responded to the health crisis. During the Spanish flu, the United States saw really big losses in production, especially in the bigger cities. According to a study by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, they say, during the Spanish flu, it's estimated that the pandemic led to 18% reduction in manufacturing outputs in areas with higher exposures. In the areas with a high mortality rate and cities that relied on labor suffered the most in the United States. In a country like the United States, the impact of the flu was bad and affected the country. However, the United States was already moving into a wartime production era, so it's economically adjusted to that. However, in a country like India, that's where the impacts were the biggest. During the Spanish flu, India was under British colonial rule. They didn't have their own government, which is why they got impacted badly. It was estimated that India had between 10 to 20 million deaths, which is about 5% or so of their population during 1918. The scale of the death in India really affected their agriculture production, which they depended on a lot. So not only was India getting hit with the flu, but also a major famine. Article Pandemic and Hunger, Lessons from the 1918 Pandemic in India, written by Kismer Tim. He says the 1918 pandemic coincided with a major famine in India, largely due to severe drought and failure of the monsoon rains. This resulted in a crop failure, food shortage, and widespread malnutrition. This in turn affected their economy because they traded a lot of agricultural goods. With none being produced, their economics crashed badly. These are just examples of how the pandemic affected certain countries. For both the Spanish flu and COVID-19 pandemics, different products in two different eras surged, whether they needed help to get rid of these viruses or to pass the time. To start, during the Spanish flu, there's an increase in medical supplies. With the virus being so deadly, it made sense that consumers would be buying lots of medical supplies. Product like luxury goods and fashion declined. During COVID-19, however, consumers were still buying medical supplies like masks, but with COVID-19 not being as deadly and COVID happening a century later, technology was the biggest thing to increase during this time. Technology products also saw massive growth as remote work, digital entertainment became the norms, and online learning became the norm. Sites like Amazon and Netflix became lifelines for many families during this time because of the shutdown across the globe. That's how both the pandemics had surge in certain products. In conclusion, both the Spanish flu and COVID-19 pandemics caused major economic problems even though they were a century apart. The Spanish flu hit the world when it was already shaken from the events from World War I, while COVID hit a highly integrated global economy. Both consumers and companies changed their ways, and both overcame their diseases and have forever changed the world's economy. By researching these two big moments in history, we can start to understand how fragile the economy is and the better way to adapt to these problems in the future.